kind of having the courage to step out, I think was the biggest part in doing that. Like I said, I don't like to think that anybody's life is necessarily conventional, but for us, it was kind of thinking and living inside that box. And so
Welcome back, all my Courage, Confidence, and Connections podcast fans. I am your host, Janice Debo, and I have a guest coming all the way from Costa Rica today. Welcome, Bradley. Brady. Oh my goodness, I'm starting off on the right foot already. Okay, Friday afternoon recordings. But anyway, welcome, Brady.
thanks so much, Janice. And you know what? Don't worry about it. I actually get it a lot. Normally, I just smile and nod because my name is one of the hardest for people to get, and it's so funny. So I've heard them all.
You've been called Bradley before.
Oh, many times. Probably more than I actually get called Brady. So
Yeah, I just wonder if it's a more common name to people, but or some of us just look at it wrong. But welcome to the Courage, Confidence, and Connections podcast. Finally, we got here.
thanks so much. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and I've been looking forward to it. So we finally made it.
Yes, we did. Now, what I like to do is have you tell our audience a little bit about you. We will get into the business stuff, but maybe about your life and just kind of chit chat about, who you are personally, and we'll go from there. We just use it as a launching pad.
No, it sounds great. Yeah. So kind of the personal background of who I am and how I got here and literally how I got it to Costa Rica.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, would love to because it's kind of a well, I think it's an interesting story, but yeah, going back pretty far, it's your typical story, hometown, small town, born and raised, and decided there had to be more out there. So I'm married and I have two beautiful women and I have two beautiful daughters, and so kind of flashing forward to that point in life. Life's been an adventure. Things were going good and we were doing things. I don't know if you'd call it conventional because I don't like to think that anybody's life is necessarily conventional, but it wasn't too far out of the box. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And so we've just been taking a look at life at one point, and we both decided there's got to be more out there. And so we've done a lot of stuff over the last several years to moving out of state, decided to get out of the hometown and just did a cold move to a state that we'd never even been to. Just decided that's the adventure we're going to have, and through that have found a lot of, I should say, smaller adventures. Kind of having the courage to step out, I think, was the biggest part in doing that. Like I said, I don't like to think that anybody's life is necessarily conventional, but for us, it was kind of thinking and living inside that box. And so for me, it was like, I want to know what's beyond the mountains, right? We lived in a valley where it was 360-degree views of mountains, which was beautiful, but you got about 3 square miles of not knowing what's beyond the horizon, literally.
Oh,
I'm not saying we never traveled out, but never stayed on the other side of that horizon. And so that was kind of on a personal note, a really pivotal point in life, just jumping out and having the courage to say, cold jump, let's go see what else is out there.
wow.
And that led to some interesting career choices and experiences, which led to traveling full time, deciding that we didn't want to be based anywhere. And so we started road tripping in our Airstream around the country and have been doing that for the last several years. And then have transitioned out of that into some international travel, Costa Rica being one of the first stops, and
Nice.
living life. So that's kind of things on a personal note.
What little town were you born and raised in?
Little town called Grants Pass in Southern Oregon. So about 2 hours from the coast in Southwest Oregon. So everybody knows Portland, or at least if you've ever heard of Oregon as a state in general, because believe it or not, some people haven't. Um, so Portland is up in the north west corner, and everybody knows Portland because it's kind of the staple city. But I was about 4 hours south, just in a little valley town, almost in the woods. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there's not much to Grants Pass. I've been there.
Have you really? Yeah, there's
Yeah.
not too
Yes,
much.
I've been through it, I guess I should say. Medford and that whole area. Ashland is really cool. That's a cool place. That's in that general vicinity, as I.
That is,
So
yeah.
how old are your daughters now?
They're 10 and 13 now.
Oh boy.
My oldest is almost 14. She'll be 14 in November.
Well, you're gonna have a driver soon.
It's funny you mentioned that. We were literally having that conversation this morning over breakfast. She looked at my wife and I and she said, "So which one of you is going to teach me how to drive?" because
Oh,
she was talking about how her birthday was coming up. So we said, the funny thing is both of us can teach you how to drive, but it's your willingness to learn how to drive that's really going to make the biggest difference here.
yeah. Oh my goodness. So how have they adjusted to all this travel and now in a foreign country?
Honestly, I got to give them a lot of credit. They've done really well. They've been pretty flexible. And for the bulk, yeah, at this point, I could almost say the majority of their life, we've been kind of in a transition or on the move. We moved when my youngest was 4. She had just turned 4 years old. And that's when we decided to make the cross country move and set up a new hometown and live for a couple of years in another state. And so overall, they've done really well with it. They've kind of taken things in stride and been excited for the next. And then having traveled literally full time for 3.5 years, well, going on 4 years now, but 3.5 just interstate, it kind of became normal to them. I'll never forget the time that my oldest sat down next to me. We were in Florida, actually looking out at the Atlantic Ocean, just on this gorgeous stretch of beach. And she sat down looking pretty serious and kind of let out a big exhale. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I'm just bored."
Wow.
I went, "This is because," and I had no grid for that because as a kid, I would have been thrilled. But she got so used to living that life and traveling and going to the beach and doing the things, seeing different. They've been to, God, 36 national parks.
Wow.
We've covered a lot of ground. So for her, it was kind of like, this is a Tuesday, like it's great and they love it, but also they don't really have a grid at this point since they were so young when we started out, for kind of where it is now, and that it's not maybe again the more conventional, typical experience that you might have.
Yeah. What's next? Where are you headed next?
Next, actually, we just locked that down, so we're going to keep heading south. Right now, we're in Central America, Costa Rica, and we're going to head down to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and check out South America.
Oh my goodness. They're going to have passports full of stamps before this is over.
That's the goal. That is the goal, is to put some stamps in the passport and have some stories to tell and some experiences.
Well, I hope somebody in the family is writing all this down.
Not as detailed as we should be. We document in different ways via, photos or videos. None of us are vloggers or even that consistent with social media as we really should be. But we've been able to get at least some good photo timelines and things going and kind of have some little narratives written down here and there.
Well, that's good because this is quite a story. And if are either of them interested in writing?
Yeah, my oldest actually has just recently expressed an interest in starting to write and get into it. She loves literature. She reads like nobody's business. In fact, they both do. My youngest has now picked it up and they're both little bookworms and I love it. But my oldest for the last few years, she will tear through books like you would not believe. She'll even, go through a book in a matter of a day or two.
Wow.
Yeah, which is funny because when she was first coming up in kindergarten, preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, the fundamentals of learning how to read and everything, she's like, "This isn't for me. I can't stand this." And we're like, "What do you mean? Like, it's a necessity. You can't just choose not to, that you don't like it." And now
That's
traveling, we have to travel light, so we've got them Kindles, and now it's like we can't keep enough books on her Kindle. She can just tear through them on, a semi-daily basis, and the conversation is often, "Hey, can I get another book on my Kindle?" It's like, "Are you kidding me? You already went through that already." So
impressive.
yeah, it really, I don't know how she does it. I personally can't. I can't do that at all. So they take after their mother in that regard because she can do that as well, tear through some literature and a story pretty fast, as far as covering a lot of ground in books. But yeah, so my oldest has just expressed an interest in getting into some creative writing and taking that on and taking a structured approach to that. So we're just tip of the iceberg with the interest, but I think
Eh,
it's there.
Well, that's great because with all that you guys are doing, somebody should really be documenting a lot of these stories. And if she's interested, boy, I would definitely continue that encouragement. Since I'm a writer, of course, I find that your stories are fascinating. Now, as you were growing up in Little Town, Oregon, what interested you and how does it relate to what you're doing now? Because we're going to go there shortly.
Perfect. I've always been really fascinated by how things work and how people got where they were going. And I didn't realize that so much until I was looking at it in hindsight. But I've always been very creative and very curious, but never really known how to apply that. So when I was a kid, I would always be drawn to something in the creative space, more artistic. And I never really took anything up consistently as far as like, some people get really into painting or art or kind of make that their thing. I was just always really active and always drawn to the creative, but more from a curiosity standpoint. And so that was something that really drew me is wanting to know how things work, and it didn't have to be anything specific. Some people are a lot more mechanically minded about it, and I definitely go down that avenue. But it was also like, wow, how did that get created? How did that, this art piece or that anything, but just it really didn't really matter what it was. It was just I was very fascinated at how something worked or how to make something work better was always really fascinating to me.
Oh, that's great. So when did you, okay, so let's talk about what you do now and venture into how you started down that road with that. And I just thought of a book when you said creative. Your daughter's picking up on that. There's a book called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I believe he's a film producer. I don't know what else he does, but it
Mhm.
is a fascinating book and it would help. I think it would help her, but with your creative, clearly it's just in a different way. So let's talk about how that transition happened to you so you can talk about what you're doing now as it relates to that.
Yeah. So I'll try to make a long, somewhat detailed and at times boring story brief. Um, I got to the point where, okay, it's time to graduate high school, figure out what you're doing next with your life. And I didn't have a solid plan on how to do that. I was always somewhat ambitious, but I didn't map things out like, arguably maybe I should have. And so I needed to, get more steady employment, jumped into the full-time working world right out of the gate because I was like, well, I just want to get some life experience. Obviously you got to make a living and get money going. Um, and so I took a job with a company that was based in manufacturing.
Okay.
And I started at the bottom. I literally started in their shipping department, hired on to do that. And I was like, great, why not? And quickly saw the different facets of what they were doing because they had a lot of creative outputs. They were a very visual company. They worked on a lot of custom designed things, for lack of a, it would we would squirrel all over going into what their specific products were. But as I started working through this company and working on shipping product out, started looking at the different departments and what they did, and it was essentially manufacturing and production, right? And so there was a lot of graphics work had to go into things. There was a lot of systems, processes, flows, because orders got to get out on time, but they also got to look good. They got to be what the customer ordered. And like I said, a lot of it was, custom engraving work and signs and banners and um, a lot of laser technology going on there with people. And so it really got fascinating to me, the different areas. And so I worked my way up through the different departments, just trying to take on more responsibility because I thought, well, I want to progress. I'm curious about these different things. And so that was the first thing that clicked is in order to do that, I have to put myself in the lane that somebody finds me useful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to prove what I was doing and then ask for more responsibility. And with more responsibility came more of a base to learn how things worked. And so eventually I ended up in the graphics department of what they were doing. So I learned graphic design on the job doing that. And then from graphic design, I actually transitioned into people management because I started into production, having worked my way up through all of the processes and the departments in the company. Then I was able to climb the ladder and say, okay, I understand how things work now. I can bring this creative aspect and eye to it. Now, how can we make it more effective and more efficient? And so that was kind of how I cut my teeth into the world of creativity because I shifted into at that level, I got experience in branding, I got experience in people management, I got experience in output, I got experience in design. It covered such a multitude of business fundamentals and business creative aspects that really kind of propelled and launched me into the next stages and set me up kind of into the channel of what would be the next sagas in my career.
Okay. I'm curious at what point. you jumped into doing your own thing because there are a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs or they want to do their own thing, but the security of a paycheck holds them back. So what was your transition point and catalyst, I guess, for that change?
So that actually took an unexpected twist. From that point, I had worked for that company for several years, had a successful career with them. Like I said, I was in upper management at that point, and so you could say it was kind of the corporate world ideal at that point. Climb the ladder and climb as high as you can towards the top. And having gained all that experience, the owner of that company was very entrepreneurial minded, and so I learned a lot about the entrepreneurship aspect of things from him and from just being able to run the operations. And he was very encouraged people to be very hands-on and independent in what they did. So he said, "Hey, basically you live or die by your decisions. So I want you to treat it like it's yours, and you've got to be accountable for that." And so that was a really cool experience to be thrown into. As scary as that was, it was like, okay, well, this isn't normally the way my understanding of the world works, but this is cool. But even still, I kind of hit that ceiling. So I had all of the entrepreneurial inspiration at that point, but it was still like, how do you break out of that? Exactly what you said. How do you break away from that safety and into that transition of knowing I want to rely on myself now. I want to do more and do it my way. And so, dabbled in small ventures here and there. And I don't even know if you could say started companies because they were really just more small side ventures, kind of getting my feet wet and getting a taste for things. And at that point, the weird twist is I decided, okay, it's sink or swim. It's time to do something really dramatic. And I took a step out into not as much the entrepreneurial journey, but I jumped into an arena that was completely independent. And I decided to start brokering real estate, which
Oh,
was completely different than my background up to that point, right? But
oh,
I decided it's time for a change. And in real estate, and I don't know, I mean, I think most people know this, there's no pay structure. You are on commission only, and it's a cold jump. And so it was about the coldest jump I could make into an independent living that I could possibly think of at that point. But it just seemed like it was a natural fit because I loved working with people. I liked the idea of being able to control more aspects of what I was trying to pursue. Once you hit kind of the glass ceiling, so to speak, it's like, okay, what else can I do? And that was one of the best experiences I've ever had because it is literally sink or swim.
yeah.
And it was a bumpy road getting into it too, because there's no smooth transition into it. You either have a cushion or you don't, and I didn't.
Mm,
I just made a cold jump, and it was that motivation and saying, okay, I have to make this work. Um, but what attracted me to it is I really loved working with people. I I never viewed it because people are like, well, why would you jump into sales after being in such a people management, creative, production-oriented processes and efficiencies background, right? Because they're seen day and night. And the funny part is looking back is I never once viewed it as sales. I
mm,
didn't I didn't actually think of it as sales until somebody brought it up to me years later. They said, well, man, it's got to be hard in sales. And I said, it's not sales for me. It's still just problem solving in a
mhm,
way that fits for a different goal. Somebody had to buy or sell something before they even picked up the phone to call me. And so I was never selling anything. I literally joke to this day that uh, I brokered millions of dollars in real estate during my career doing that, and I never sold a thing because I wasn't trying to sell. Because we have this idea that sales is trying to convince somebody to do something, whether they want to or not, and
right.
that the result is we make money by convincing somebody to do that thing. And I never once did that. I would always set people down and say, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? What is it that you're trying to do? Why do you want to sell your home? Why do you want to buy a home? Where are you at? What are all the moving pieces? And so I was able to actually break that apart and use kind of my project management skills and
Oh,
project management aspect of my brain and say, okay, so here's what the process looks like. Here's what you're telling me your goals are. And this is what the roadmap is going to look like to get to those goals. When we find these pieces that fit, then we're going to kick it into this phase of the plan. And I'm going to walk you every step of the way through that because that's what they were hiring me for. That's what they wanted me to do. And so I would tell people it's a win-win. When you win and your goals are met and your priorities are reached, then my goals are met and my priorities are reached. And it works in that order. You win, then I win. So I understood very quickly that it was just bringing the value in a different way. And I had to be very creative to get that done. Contract negotiations, I love it. It's not boring. It's creative problem solving to me.
um,
How might we make it better?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So great segue. Let's talk about what you do now with all that experience and under your belt that puts you in a position to do what you do. So let's venture down that road.
Perfect. So taking all of that experience, and there's a few more career avenues in between those, but what I realized is looking back there, because I got recruited actually out of that phase into, well, I worked briefly for the Magnolia Company because brokering real estate, um, that was part of that whole transition, and we decided to move to Texas. And so I actually got hired on with the Magnolia Company, and I was still independent, but I was working under their umbrella. And what I loved about that company is they were really big into the customer experience and the user experience. They were really focused on transactions working well and the creative problem solving aspect that I brought to real estate. That's why I identified with them. But they also focused on what does it feel like? What is the experience? How are we getting people to where they want to go? And what experience are they having along the way? And so I learned a lot of that aspect from them. So I actually started deep diving into that even harder in studying the user experience aspect of things, as well as the customer experience aspect. And then from there, got recruited into a national company that was a fintech startup, and that was the area they wanted me into is their customer experience. So I was coordinating again between essentially five different companies and making sure that everything went smoothly and
Mhm.
that the customer's experience was everything they desired it to be. And so I then decided to make the jump to where we are now and go independent because I looked back at everything and I went, what are the main themes that I have been doing in what seems like vastly different industries? But once I stopped and looked back, I realized I have reoccurring themes and things that I've been doing for all of these different companies and all of these different industries and independently for myself for the better part of a decade. Um, what am I doing here?
Mhm.
And it was a project management framework and mindset and saying, okay, what are we trying to map? What is the goal? And how do we know if we've hit that goal? So we need to be able to map that out. And then not only just the practical of did we accomplish it, but what does that feel like? That user experience and that customer experience bubble, living in that. And then circling back to, playing off of the feels, um, what is it that people are wanting to experience? What problems are we trying to solve? That's the brand aspect of the circle over here. What is the mission? What is the vision? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the values we're bringing to our culture? What culture have we created? And now that culture is going to inform our brand, and our brand is going to inform how the company performs from there on out. So I would take those three circles and realize that I kind of lived in the middle of that Venn diagram because people usually view those three things as very different fields. And I went, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be at all. And so I set out to tie all three of those worlds together because I had been doing that anyway and help other companies and other business owners do what they were trying to do better. And so one of the fundamental bases that I built what I do now on is the design question of how might we make it better? And so essentially, that's how I transitioned into wanting to help other people bring clarity, structure, vision, understanding, roadmap, presence to what they're trying to accomplish. And I built a creative firm around doing that.
That's fantastic. I remember years ago when I was in sales, I one of my clients was very large real estate company in central North Carolina, probably the biggest in the state to this day. But they tried to recruit me, and I know what you're saying. I couldn't do the cold jump. I couldn't. It was like I said. So what does it take? I started talking dollars with them. They said, well, long as you have 9 to 12 months worth of expenses in the bank, you can do it. I'm like, got the glassy eyed look like, what now? You mean I won't get paid? So, it was too much of a cold jump for me, but that was brave, especially having a family and such at that time, probably, right?
Yeah, I made that transition right before my youngest daughter was born, at that point. And so it was something that I had wanted to move into and gradually move into, but was never able to quite figure out how to make that cold jump, until it really came right down to it. And it was like, okay, I found an opportunity that was going to afford me not enough money to make the transition, but enough that I was willing to say, okay, it's time to go. It's time to do this because the writing was on the wall. I knew that if I stayed where I was never going to do anything else. And to me, that was harder and scarier than the next step. They always say, the next step is because staying where you are became more painful than the fear of moving into what you don't know.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we just touched on the topic here pretty pretty easily because you had the courage to make the jump, you got the confidence to do what you do, and you had the connections. So there's my theme. You just sped right into it. And that's fantastic. And with what you do you have any particular industry that you like to serve? Or are you open to work with pretty much anyone, any size business? What is your preference, or do you have one?
I don't necessarily have one, but the theme that is reoccurring is service-based industries. So there's not one specific vertical that I work in because what I do and the methodology that I use and how I do it, I can adapt it pretty seamlessly into multiple industry verticals. But the one that I find works the best with, or the one theme that I find that works the best with is service-based industries.
Oh,
So regardless of who that it could be professional services, it could be trade services. Really, it's a business that is serving other people or other businesses. So that's B2B or B2C,
right.
because it's really about who are we serving? What kind of value are we trying to bring? Who are we? What is it that we're promising to deliver? And then how can we make that better? And then how can we solve our customer's problem? And I help them align into that. And that gets done a lot smoother and a lot more effectively, I think, in service-based industries than it does, say, in product-based. And I've worked with product-based as well, and I do love that because my creative mind is always like, oh, this is so cool. How do we get this, you know, in the position it needs to be? But there's a lot more nuances and metrics, I think, that live in product-based and commerce businesses than just service-based businesses. It's a lot more, there's a lot more factors to take into account. So I would say really anybody in service, whether it
Okay,
be B2B or B2C.
that's good to know. That's good to know. And we've talked before, but I want our audience to have that, that feedback. And we'll have all your information available at the end of the broadcast. Now, as we wrap this up, because we're closing in on our normal time frame, do you have any advice for someone who's aspiring to make a jump or and being in you've covered so much ground and territory in your life, literally and physically, physical. Okay, I don't know, maybe it's a Friday afternoon talk. Okay. But you have literally across the country and down to other countries, but also professionally. What advice would you give to someone that's kind of hanging out there waiting to make a decision, not sure how to do it? What kind of advice would you give to someone in that situation?
Hmm. I love that question. And I've only just now really put some time into reflecting on it myself. And I think if I could look back and give myself the advice that I'm about to give now, it would be don't let fear be the indicator of whether you think it's a right or wrong decision, because the fear is going to be there anyway. Right. And so we always wait till it feels good, till it feels right, till we feel ready. And the truth is, you're never going to feel ready. You're never going to be ready because, to be completely honest, as soon as you think you've got all your bases covered, either you've kind of missed the best time to jump in on it, you've waited too long, and it's never that the opportunity is missed, but you might make things harder on yourself by doing that. And two, it's just understanding that you're never ready. It's a learning process. So progress is so much more important than being ready and being willing to overcome that fear, because we look at fear as like, okay, this is, an indicator that maybe I'm not doing something right. It's like, no, I think if you're afraid of it, you're probably doing the right thing, and you're going to figure out how to overcome that. And in doing it scared is one of the most valuable things that you can do. And I say that as somebody who refused for many years to do it scared. It's like, oh no, I don't know how to make that jump. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait till it feels good. I'm going to wait till it's logical. Don't wait till it's logical. Don't wait till it makes sense, because you'll never do it. I look back at some decisions, good and bad. It's like I did some crazy stuff,
Mhm.
and having a young family, it's like I don't know if it was the best move, but it also led to the next step, which the next steps then led to the things that actually fit and the opportunities that were actually part of what we were trying to do. And what I was trying to do as a person, as an individual, as a husband, as a father. You're never ready. So don't ever let the fear be an indicator that you shouldn't do it.
Right. Yeah, and I'm 100% on board with that. When I went into sales from an office job, I didn't even think about it. It was like I was a natural. Plus, the guys that I was working with, and I worked for 8 different men in sales. They said, "You don't know how to take orders, so you better find something else to do." And so my motivation was to do something, and I was good with people. And one of the guys became a mentor and said, "We need to get you ready for sales." And I was hired by somebody else entirely. However, I didn't overthink it. And I sometimes it's good to think, it's good to consider, and it's good to talk to people who will be supportive with wisdom. However, like you said, when we sit and overanalyze, overthink, and wait and wait and wait, that opportunity may pass and it may be too late to do something that you're really, really good at and would get a lot out of. And you have certainly proven that point. And I hope you'll embrace the journey of writing or at least having your daughter write because seriously, you've got quite a story to tell and you've got a writer in the family. So being a writer, I would say, let's get this stuff written down sooner than later.
I really appreciate that, Janice, and I am actually leaning into that. So I'm encouraging her, and I've always played with the idea. There again, right? Do it scared, or do it before you're ready. I've actually just started working on some writing, literally as of last week, because I went, okay, enough thinking about this, enough talking about this. If I don't just jump into it and figure it out, it's the idea of building a plane while you're flying it. I'm not going to, because I've never considered myself a writer, but I'm like, I think I've got to get this out of my mind and I've got to get this on the paper because what I've really always and what I built my current business on and what I love doing is if I can help somebody else close that gap, if I can help you line up your next steps before having to figure it out the hard way, I
Mhm.
will. I believe there is definitely some value in learning and learning the hard way, but I don't think that has to be inflicted, right? So if I can help bridge that gap for somebody, because there's plenty of challenges in life. Life is never short of challenges. So if I can make, just one thing smoother for somebody else to get where they're going, I want to do that. And that's actually one of the missions that I built this entire business on. Let's get you where you're going and try to figure out how to do that in the smoothest way possible.
So you just preached to the choir and told yourself what you need to do. Uh,
Yep, literally.
literally, literally. So now you're on record, and I'm your accountability voice in this. Is like, well, okay. Did you start? But yeah, it could be a fun thing you share with your older daughter as well. Um, So I just encourage you highly to take that leap again. But thank you so much for being my guest. Brayton, this is Brady Helm with STYRE Creative. And believe me, if you haven't been inspired by this, go back and listen to it again because man, now you're headed to Argentina. I just shake my head and go, okay. It was a big jump for me to get to Oregon, so I admire your, your adventurousness with you and your family. I think it's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Janice. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to come on and share my experiences. And like I said, hopefully it helps anybody out there who's thinking about doing something on their own and needs the courage to do it. Do it before you're ready. Yeah, even Costa Rica and Argentina, a little bit of a confession. I don't really speak Spanish.
Oh,
None of us do. I know enough to get by, and that is very, very little. And if we waited to go the places we wanted to go until I had learned the full skills I needed to learn, even for just communications, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now from where I am. So, do it before you're ready. I literally am walking that out, and what's the worst that can happen?
that's right. Yeah, you can use the wrong word and get the wrong food, but whatever.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get the Spanish nailed down, and the girls will figure it out a lot sooner than the adults. I guarantee you that. Yeah, they'll be translating for you.
Yeah, they'll pick it up quick, right? Young minds, they learn so fast.
They do. But thank you again, Brady. This has been wonderful. And I had no idea, as much as we've talked, I had no idea of that whole story. So I'm delighted we got it on record and get to share it with my listeners and your listeners. So we're signing off for another Courage, Confidence, and Connections podcast. Janice Debo, your host, with Brady Helm as my guest. and you'll find all of his information at the end of the broadcast. And thank you for watching.